Backbiters, syndicators, standing all around the door.
Hello there, Wakulla County, and welcome to the Wakulla Sunday radio program with your host, Herb Donaldson. When those of us in the Wakulla County area hear the words Sheriff David Harvey, many things spring to mind. From pride in the young man who, at age 26, became the Wakulla County Sheriff, to anger and disappointment toward the man sworn to protect and serve. Effective October 1st, Sheriff Harvey is scheduled to officially resign from the position he's held for 35 years. I admit, I was a bit nervous about meeting Sheriff Harvey, not because I had any outstanding warrants or anything of that sort, but because I'd heard so much about him from places like the Wakulla News and the Tallahassee Democrat. And when speaking to the people of our county about who he is as a person, no one can really give a definitive answer. Some people praised him, felt the community should back him in almost any endeavor he undertook, while others remained completely silent on all things Harvey, as if the very utterance of his name was enough to bring down impending doom. I felt it best to speak to him directly. No politics, no judgment. Today, when you walk into his office, it is in complete disarray. A lifetime of memories, awards, photos were being put away so that a second life, new memories, could begin. As I stood in the doorway, I thought of my grandmother, Annie. Mr. Harvey spoke at her funeral. As a child, she was his nanny. I wanted to know more about the little boy she knew.
Well, I grew up here in the county, go back about 5 generations. I graduated from Wakulla High School, and I grew up on a farm. My father had a farm, and he also had a store. I don't know if you ever remember that store. It's down at the ice plant, where Ducks is right there. And I graduated from Wakulla High School. I was able to get a scholarship to play college baseball. So I went off over to Chipola and played for 2 years over there and got an AA degree. Then I transferred to FSU and initially majored in hotel and restaurant administration. But I switched over to criminology. It was a little bit boring, but now I run a hotel. They call it the Harvey Hilton. Okay. Got about 300 guests back there in the jail. But so after I got my degree from FSU, I got a job with the state of Florida as a parole officer in 1974. I graduated in 1972. I graduated from FSU in 72, graduated from Wakulla High in 68. So I became a parole officer in 72. I did that for 4 years, and then I ran for sheriff and got elected.
When you became sheriff, did you set a particular goals for yourself when starting the job?
A lot of goals. It was very small then. We only had about 11 employees, whereas now I have 170 employees. We have grown in 35 years from 11 to 170. We've got about 50 deputy sheriffs out. We handle about 80,000 calls for service a year that come into our central dispatch and 911, and we dispatch fire and ambulance too. They represent about 5% of those calls. But a lot of goals. Actually, I have to tell you that resource officer in the school, that was one of my goals. We were able to put uniformed officers in our schools with the support of the school board. I actually hired the first full-time black deputy sheriff in the history of Wakulla County. I think it was Curtis Donaldson, but or it may have been one before that. Can't remember, but no, probably Curtis. And of course, since then I've hired many. And hired the first full-time female deputy sheriff in the history of Wakulla. And then so many other things that we've been able to do with our volunteer programs, our emergency operations center over here, the jail, which is now a 350-bed jail. You know, I started off with an 18-bed jail. So tremendous changes, tremendous growth, a lot of programs that I've started here. It's been fun.
In the late 1960s, when the Crawfordville and Sopchoppy high schools consolidated, David met Rhonda Quigg from Sopchoppy. She was the 11th of 12 children. She was later Wakulla High's homecoming queen and valedictorian. She received no scholarship when she graduated, but managed to put herself through college. They were married in 1970, and their son Trafton was born in 73. With his being elected at 26, making him Florida's youngest elected sheriff, how did he serve the public in one arena and his family in the other?
You know, I have mixed emotions about that. There have been times when I think, oh, hey, you know, this job is so demanding. And it really is 24/7 that perhaps I've neglected my wife and my son, you know, because anytime you're in this type position, you know, you just always have that feeling. You just really do. But now as I look back, you know, 35 years, I probably did maybe the best that I could humanly do. I mean, you know, would I have wanted to do better? Yeah. Could I have? I don't know, you know. I mean, because I remember when my son was the first grade, they had to tell what their daddy does. You know, all the kids had to stand up. And his teacher told me about this years later, and she said, I asked each one of them how to do it, and said, your son, when I came to your son, said, well, my daddy, the phone rings late at night, and he gets up and he leaves, and then he comes back the next day and he sleeps all day long. And so now here's a kid, you know, 6 years old, trying to tell his classmates what his daddy does. And he knows I'm a sheriff, he knows the phone rings, he knows that I get up and leave, and some days I didn't come back for 2 or 3 days. And so, yeah, it's been very testing on my family, and I just appreciate the fact that they have stood by me.
His grandfather was a World War I veteran who later served on the school board of Wakulla County. His father, a World War II veteran, landed in the D-Day invasion at Normandy, and, along with many others, fought their way into Germany. I wanted to know from Mr. Harvey if there was ever an incident that defined fully his role as sheriff.
Well, the evolution of the service, you know, you begin to realize that you're everybody's daddy, you're everybody's preacher, you're everybody's confidant, you're everybody's friend, you know, in need. You many roles that an elected sheriff has to play. Your grandmother. I was David to her. I wasn't the sheriff, but she, you know, and so, but there's no specific incident. When you read the duties and responsibilities of the elected office of sheriff, and how broad and how powerful it is, you have. I have policies that allow deputy sheriffs to use deadly force, take a life. I have policies, and I have to enforce laws where I put people in human bondage, in custody, transport inmates to death row down at Stark. So it's an awesome office with awesome powers.